Good day, ladies and gents. This is Tsepo Moapi once more with Life in Perspective. Today, I just want to do a recap with you guys around some of the stuff we've been discussing. I think we started off discussing life. We discussed life as a system that is able to perform duties. And this was very important because we then obviously reflected on this by using other different species that have been created and how their life forms are actually exhibits of what we call life, and how the systematic way in which they exist and how that interlinks with the systematic way in which we exist as humans as well, and how other species are also all interlinked, and everything that they do actually affects one another because they are interdependent. And you'll find those that are dependent, some that are interdependent, all of them, you will find them operating within their spaces and within their environment. So when we say life is a system that is capable of performing duties, it has to perform duties within a specific environment. And that is very important to understand because every environment has the ability to determine and to dictate some of the things that need to happen to a species. And we as humans, we find ourselves in an environment where there is a lot to deal with, and that environment is called planet Earth. And we find ourselves having to deal with a lot of things that are imposed by the environment or imposed by the lifestyle or the civilization that we have created as human beings, whether it comes in a form of financial systems, comes in a form of political systems, comes in a form of leadership systems or socio-economic systems, whatever type of systems that are there that we've created as human beings, they are now becoming systems that govern how we operate as human beings. And this becomes important for us to understand, which is why we then ultimately classified life in three main pillars, to say for us to then have a better understanding or a better grasp of the importance of us knowing and understanding life better as a system, we need to know these pillars that govern the life form. And there's obviously more pillars, but in this particular context, we are focusing mainly on three pillars. And the first pillar was the pillar of reproduction, And we were looking at how even throughout time, you will find that there's been information that has been discovered. There's been discoveries of different things, different ways of doing things, different efficient ways of doing things. And there's been new information with discoveries and research and all sorts of other things that have been happening. And there's been also innovations that have built our civilization to where it is now. And you will find that, for people to come up with innovations, they had to use information that they would have gathered from previous generations for them to be able to appropriate. I mean, it's basically a structure that is there that I believe that, everything that has existed up to this far, we had to reproduce to some extent, generation after generation. And I defined reproduction as a tool that is being used not only to pass on information, but also to pass on several things that are important to the next generation. And it could be, a parent to a child where there are some genetic codings that they transfer to the child, and you will find that child will have certain mannerisms that come as an inheritance because they have the blood of the parent in them, and they will have certain things in them that they've adopted. This is part of now what we would call the biological reproduction. And then you will find obviously there's an element of mental reproduction, which is important because the mental reproduction talks to the fact that information shouldn't get lost. Information must be passed from one generation to another. And there's also other things that are adopted. Not only is it just information, not only is it just the genetic side of things, there's also many other things that have been passed on generation to generation, where people are becoming better and better and more efficient in doing things because they are learning from generations that lived before them. And this is why the law of reproduction then becomes important. The second law that we dealt with the law of adaptation. Adaptation becoming very important because as our environment changes and as everything moves and with time, different environments, we get exposed to different things. We venture into other territories where we would want to explore. I mean, right now there's people exploring, if we could live in Mars as people, and they're trying to check if that environment would be suitable for us. And even if we ever do succeed to get to Mars and be inhabitants of planet Mars, the chances are we will be faced with different challenges compared compared to the challenges we are faced on Earth. It would then require that the human must then be, adapt. They must then have the ability to adapt. They must have the ability to be flexible enough to even survive in that environment in as different as it is from what they are used to. And you can see it over time with different generations, different races. If you look at their history and how they would have evolved over time because of the environments that they've moved in. And some of them could be political environments, some of them could be socio-economic environments, some of them could be leadership environments that are different. And you've seen how the Germans have evolved from where they started off to where they are now, and how the Russians as well have evolved, how China has evolved, how it has grown from what it was before to what it is now, how Japan has become so sophisticated in how they do certain things, how different countries have evolved from different positions that they were in to where they are now. And all of that has everything to do with our ability to adapt. And our ability to adapt has been one of those biggest pillars why human beings have thrived over the years, because we have a unique and an amazing ability to adapt to different climatic conditions, to different socioeconomic conditions, to different types of environments. We are able to actually adjust, and we are able to do very well in those environments as we thrive and learn how to do better in those environments. So the pillar of adaptation then becomes important, because we touched on a lot of things, including the pillar of reproduction, where we spoke about different laws that are underpinning that particular pillar. And even with adaptation, we spoke about different laws that underpin that particular pillar. And then we started off speaking about response to stimuli. So for the past 2 to 3 months, we've basically been talking around response to stimuli. We've touched a lot of topics around this. We've spoken on relationships, we've spoken on business deals, we've spoken on type of relationships, not just love relationships, not just romantic relationships. We've looked at business relationships, we've looked at socio-economic relationships, we've looked at different types of relationships that are actually influencing how humans are able to respond to stimuli. Now, response to stimuli then becomes important for us to understand, because it basically talks to the fact that we should always know that everything that is good and bad happens to everyone. And you shouldn't live life hoping that only the good must happen to you. And you should not live life also thinking that only the bad must happen to you. You must always keep in mind that the good and the bad will happen to everyone. But the effect or the impact of those things is determined by how you react and respond to them. The effect of them or the impact of those things is determined by how you respond or react to them. And thus, the response to stimuli. A stimuli we defined as something that comes from the outside. And it could also be something that is triggered by external things, but it happens on the inside. So that requires you as a person to have some form of balance as a person. You need to have a perspective of life that is checked so that you are able to respond appropriately to these type of things. So response to stimuli basically deals with the fact that you can have 10 different people having the same experience, but it will not impact them the same way because of their perception. What we are basically saying is that perception affects your perspective. Yeah, your perception affects your perspective. Life carries a series of good and bad exposures, and you need to understand that. And you need to embrace that, because you need to realize that everything that's good and bad happens to everyone. It happens to everyone, and ultimately it has everything to do with you and how you actually respond or react to that which is a stimuli outside. So it could be a bad experience that 5 people are going through. Another person could look at that situation and feel like, I'm always experiencing bad things. I have bad luck. Why must bad things always happen to me? Other people might say, every time when I'm about to do something good, something bad must happen and discourage me. Another person might have something that bad and think, my life is a mess anyways. Always something bad always happens. And anyways, let me just give up and not even bother myself. Another person would look at that and think differently about it. They'll look at it and say, wow, this is difficult, but what am I learning from it? What is it that I can pick up from this? What is it that I can use to develop so that next time I face similar situations, I am better geared up to be able to actually do good? And then another person will look at it and see it as an opportunity to grow and say, this difficulty, in as much as it is presented to me, let me find ways on how to capitalize on it and use it to my advantage. And these are the different perspectives that people can have just purely based on their perception. They can have different perspectives because of the a perception. And however way you look at the situation, what you perceive is what you will ultimately live by. That's what you will ultimately live by. So this is what God meant when he said, people must be fruitful and multiply. They must be fruitful and multiply. Because what it meant is that you need to go there and understand that everything that happens in life, you produce after your own kind. So if you are a negative person, you produce negativity. If you are a positive person, you produce positivity. And what it means, it does not mean that bad and good things are not going to happen to you alike. But what it means is that your mind will produce a positive perspective of life. Your mind will produce a positive perspective of life. Why? Because your perception of whatever you go through is not a bad or good perception. No, it is a perception that says life experiences will happen. Let me do what I have to do to every situation that I encounter. It does not matter how it comes. I can learn from it. I can leverage from it. I can grow from it. I can develop from it, and I can use it to do better in life. And once that is your perception, your perspective many a times will always be a positive perspective of life. And that positive perspective is what catapults a lot of people into levels where they are actually able to do so much for themselves. And this is important for us to understand, because once we actually begin to think negative and everything that happens, our perspective of life is negative, our perspective of life is bad, more than half the time what happens is we degrade our ability to do well. We degrade our ability to do well, and then we end up living a substandard life, a life that is lower than the life that we should actually be living. And it becomes a problem, because once we get into that space, then we even lose hope in ourselves, we lose belief in ourselves, we lose trust in ourselves. We are unable to actually measure up to whatever that we need to deal with in life and get ahead, or conquer and be able to stand up tall in spite of what you are going through and what you are experiencing, simply because your perspective of life is a negative perspective, and it forces you to live beyond the life that you were meant to live. So many a times we actually how do I put it? We actually degrade the life that we should be living by thinking negatively. There is so much that is available out there for people who are positive thinkers. And our ultimate goal, even as people, is to say, whatever that I go through as a person, I need to either find growth out of it, I need to find a lesson out of it, I need to find something out of it that actually makes me respond properly to the stimuli of the challenge of life or situations. Doesn't matter what they are, whatever they are, you need to be able to look at them and say, how do I make good out of this situation? How do I make this work for me? And it's important to be able to do that, because everyone is exposed to life's current form of existence. All of us are exposed to it, and that is why you'll find that a lot of people, it feels natural for them to always think negative. It feels natural for them to always think bad. It feels natural, but many a times it seems to be harder to think positive, because even the system around that has been designed. It's designed such that, or it has been set such that many a times bad things are what is more prevalent than what we would call good. But even in the midst of that, one can have a perception of life that is so good that even your perspective becomes positive. And it's important to do that. Now, realize that everyone goes through the same stuff. They go through good and bad. No one here is bad luck. No one here has bad fortune. No one here is in the wrong side of life. But it has everything to do with what you conceive with your mind through perception that will ultimately become your perspective. And that's what changes everything else. So you need to then get yourself into a space where you begin to say, I am going to change the way I perceive things. I am going to change the way, even if it is known as being something that is bad, I can perceive it and find opportunity out of it. I can perceive it and find growth out of it. I can perceive it and find lessons out of it. I can perceive it and find so much in it that when I walk out of that thing, it is ultimately not as bad as how everyone else would have perceived it, because my perception was a perception that says I can grow from anything, whether good or bad, I can grow from it. Therefore, my perspective is always positive about everything, and it becomes important. So good and bad are inherently part of the life system. They are there, whether we like it or not, whether we want to experience them or not, they will be there. And it is what it is. And we just need to develop for ourselves a system that allows us to be able to deal with this thing, whether at different levels or intensities. Some people have this saying that says, yeah, but you've not been through what I've been through, or you don't know how it's like to be where. Look, it does not matter. Everyone has a scale. We have a scale of what we go through as people, and you can take a scale from 0 to 10. You might be complaining sitting at scale number 3. There's people who are experiencing problems that are at scale number 10. And yet you think at scale number 3, your problems are the biggest thing that has ever happened to the world and no one actually really understands you. You must know at any given point in time when you experience something, there is someone out there going through more than you. At any given point in time when you experience something good, there is someone out there experiencing better than you. Whatever the case might be, there will always be people experiencing less and more than you at any given point in time, whether good or bad. It makes no difference whatsoever. But what changes everything is your perception, because your perception affects your perspective. And it's very important for you to understand this. So whether at different levels, like I said, whether you are a good person or not, whether you experience bad and good, it really doesn't matter. Even if you are a good person, don't expect that life will be good to you, because life dishes out similarly to everyone. And whether those people are good or bad, it makes no difference. What ultimately changes everything is how those people perceive what they are going through. If you are a bad person and you perceive things are always bad, and you're just bad towards people because everything is bad, there's nothing good about this world, everything is always bad, the likelihood is that your perspective of life is going to be a bad one. And the likelihood is that you are also going to attract more bad than good, and you are also going to manifest more bad than good. But if you change your mindset and say, I will change my perception so that my perception is that of growth, my perception is that of development, my perception is that of opportunity, my perception is that of me capitalizing and leveraging on whatever that is there. It does not matter what it is, I need to leverage that perception. More than half the time will give you an ability to stay positive in life. Perception determines how things impact and affect you in life. Perception determines how things impact and influence or affect you in life, because everything that we go, and whether good or bad, it makes no difference, because even if your perception about good things is not good, it can also be very negative. You'll find a lot of people that are experiencing a lot of good things in their life. You find that their perception of life becomes skewed, because then they think everyone else who's not experiencing good things is just lazy, or is just not doing things the right way, or there's something wrong that they are doing. You know, there are people that feel if you don't get your breakthroughs, or you have certain challenges in life, they will make the assumption that you have bad luck, or things are not going well for you because you don't work hard enough, or you don't do this. You see, success even on its own, even good that happens in people's life, can affect their perspective, because they will think, they are the best thing that has ever happened in the world, because they're experiencing the good of the good that life has to offer, while everyone else is going through difficulty. That perception on its own can be very dangerous, because when that person goes through difficulty, they might even themselves finding hard to get out of there, because their perception of negative things is that you must have done something wrong, or you must not be doing something right, or you must not be understanding how you should do certain things. And when they find themselves in that space, they find it very difficult to actually get out of it. And even the ones that always go through bad things, many a times you will go through so much bad that even in your mind you find it very difficult to break out of that mentality of being negative. But it is something that you need to be intentional about, something you will need to develop. You need to actually get in there and deal with it. Now, someone might say to me, no, look, I would rather experience good things all my life. I'd prefer having good than bad. That is just as equally dangerous. For an example, I want money. A lot of people don't realize that money is an amplifier of character. There's a lot of character traits that people have that are innate. They are sitting there quietly because the money has not presented itself. And when it comes, that's when you see the true colors of a person. They are now manifesting those things that were subtle in them, because the money has amplified. Good things can make you arrogant as a person. That's another thing. So even if you want to experience good things, now you have to fight and always make sure you bring realism in your life, so that you remain real and you remain aligned, so that you don't become arrogant. And they can become pompous as well. Now imagine, you need to remain humble. You need to keep yourself in check if you're experiencing good things all the time, so that you don't become pompous, because that on its own can also destroy you. And good things alone can make a person lose touch with reality. It's very important to understand why life is designed for good and bad to occur to people alike. It's because you can lose sight. You can lose sight and touch of reality. And you think you live in the clouds. You think everything good will happen to you and nothing bad will happen. And those who are experiencing bad are just, they're just unfortunate, or they're not lucky, or they are not blessed, or whatever terminology you want to use. And you end up thinking that you are the best thing that has ever happened. And that creates a very, very big challenge for us. So I just want to touch on this before I close. I just want to talk to how do we then develop a balanced perception. How do we develop a balanced perception? I've mentioned three main aspects of our creation. I said you are designed as a person. You are designed. The most prominent part of you as a human being is your spirit. You are a spirit. You are a spirit, you have a soul, and you live in a body. You are a spirit, you have a soul, and you live in a body. So you need to understand that these three different aspects are very critical when it comes to balance. So when we talk balance in life, we talk balance in these three different aspects. So what does it mean? It means you must increase your value in your mental growth, which is the soul part. You must increase your value in your mental space. The kind of information you absorb, the kind of things you allow to enter your head. Because the truth be told, ultimately, whatever you absorb, that will dictate how you become as a person. You become what you absorb. Whatever material you read, whatever television programs you watch, whatever it is, whatever music you listen to, that's what defines who you are ultimately. Over time, even your personality will align to those things that you're absorbing. So you need to be really careful what kind of stuff you put into your mind, because that will dictate what we call mental growth. And if you don't keep that in check, many a times you will find that you develop things that you also are shocked about them when they're in your life. You are shocked, how can I have such a habit? And you don't realize that exposure to different things is what actually leads to alterations in personality, or even the birthing of different personality traits that come up over a period of time because of that very same exposure. And we also talk about physical growth as a person, and you can look at physical growth from a health perspective to say, how do you take care of your physical body? How do you take care of your physical body? Is it something that you just do for the sake of doing? I can tell you right now, a lot of billionaires that ran for money and forgot everything else, some of them ended up rich but with serious health problems because they actually didn't strike a balance. And it's very critical to understand that even if you chase your dreams, you need to chase your dreams from a balanced perspective. You can't lose your life trying to chase assets. You can't lose your life trying to chase material stuff. There are other things you need to do for you to remain balanced, and that has everything to do with keeping healthy. You'll find some of the people that did well even in their lives, you'll find that many of them did well because they actually struck a balance, and they were able to get into a space where they managed how their mental growth looked like, the trajectory of their mental growth, and they were able to align that to the physical growth. Because sometimes you can tell if you want to grow towards a certain direction or towards a certain level, there are certain things that are required for you to grow towards that direction. And even your physical body has to be fit to some level for it to handle the pressures of where you are going. So it means you prepare in a balanced way. You prepare mentally, you prepare physically. And my personal favorite, which is the third one, is spiritual preparation. If we do not realize that life is spiritual, there are a lot of things that are what I would call a mystery, because under natural circumstances or from a natural perspective, we find it hard to explain those things because they are spiritual. And there are a lot of those components in what we call the life system. A lot of components that are spiritual. And unless a person will take the time to develop themselves spiritually so that they have spiritual maturity, it's going to be very difficult for them to have a balanced perception of life. And that is one of the things today. If you look at society and you look at young people, you look at different age groups of people, it's not like, we've paid a lot of attention to spiritual growth and spiritual maturity. Yes, throughout time you can look, even the scientists have also checked and determined that, even a human being only uses about 9% of their cerebral capacity. They use only about 9% of their cerebral capacity, which means we're not even using the 91% that is still there. We are not even using. We're only using 9%. And look at what we've done with the 9%. Look at how much development we've brought in. Look at how many things we've innovated only with that 9%. Only just with that 9%. Now we've explored and pushed ourselves where it comes to the power of the mind and what the mind can actually do for us. And we've explored that through education, through development, a lot of different things in how we enhanced our ability to think and become more and more intelligent. Because truth be told, out of all the things that God has created, a human being is probably the most intelligent creature that God has ever created. Because it's the only creature that He has allowed to have the free will to decide what it wants to do, when and how it wants to do it without any immediate repercussions. And that is one of the most important things that shows you how powerful you are as a human being in terms of the power of your mind. But we have not actually taken the time to explore the power of our spirit, because many of us don't even take that element seriously. Many of us don't even take a relationship with God as something to write home about. We don't take it seriously. We don't think it's important. And what we don't realize is that relationship with God just doesn't only end with relationship with God. But it also goes beyond that when it comes to self, where you develop to a point where you can use some of those spiritual tools you are developing for you to get ahead in life and for you to do well in life. And it's important to understand this, because if life is spiritual, it means my ability to navigate life is also proportional to my level of maturity in my spiritual life. So if my spiritual life is lacking, the likelihood is that my ability to navigate life as a spiritual thing is going to be very difficult, and a lot of things are going to be confusing. A lot of things are not going to be aligned. I'm just going to not find my way around navigating everything that I have to navigate in this lifetime. And that becomes a challenge, because then you will find a bunch of people who end up being frustrated, who end up being depressed, who end up going through stress and strain, because they do not know what is it that they need to do next for them to actually get ahead and be able to do well for themselves. But I can tell you right now, increase your value in your mental growth, increase your value in your physical fitness, increase your value in your spiritual maturity. If you focus on these three things, you are going to develop yourself towards a direction where you are very matured in how you respond to stimuli, because your perception of life is going to be so balanced that your perspective becomes amazing. Everything that you go through in life, your perspective is going to be sharp and going to be on point. It's going to be inspirational. It's going to even, it's going to even empower you as a person. It's going to be empowering to you, not disempowering, but it's going to be empowering towards you. Why? Because you have allowed yourself to grow in these three different aspects so much that you are able to now look at life and have a better understanding of some of the things that you are going through as a person. And with reference to some of the stuff I've been saying in the past few weeks, including bloodlines and where you are coming from, those things begin to make sense and everything begins to fall into place much better, because you now have a better understanding of these three aspects of our creation and you are not ignoring them. We wouldn't have had a spirit if the spiritual side of our lives was not important. We would have just had a soul and we would have a body, just like other animals that do not have spirits. They just have a soul and a body. And that's it. They live their lives monotonously, and they just follow the same routine every day. Nothing changes. They wake up in the morning hungry, they hunt, they eat, they sleep, they lie around and do this. They don't bother themselves about a lot of stuff. We have much more to do in our life. We have to develop, grow things. We have to build, we have to innovate. We have to find ways to survive. There's a lot of things for us to do. Hence, our level of intelligence as creatures also becomes important, because what it means is that for as long as we continue to enhance and build that, not only in the mind, not only physically, but also spiritually. And I believe this spiritual element of us is one we need to begin to be intentional about and give it as much attention as we possibly can, because it is seriously lacking. A lot of people are clueless about anything spiritual. A lot of people are in the dark about anything spiritual, and they think spiritual things are gothic. They think spiritual things must remain a mystery. Spiritual things are confusing, because we are not even making an effort to develop ourselves in that direction. It's very important for us to get there. How we can develop a balanced perception of life by developing ourselves in these three different aspects. Thank you so much. It is important. Remember, perception affects your perspective. Perception affects your perspective, because your perception determines how everything that is stimuli around you can impact and affect you. Thank you so much.